automatically we are going to see East African community being the powerhouse for the entire continent of Africa.
Interesting way to introduce Raila Odinga. Now, my question then would be, we saw a strategy whereby one of the East African hopefuls pull out of the race. The foreign minister of Somalia, Madam Halima Amal, she pulled out of the race. Does this mean the East Africa is positioning itself to have one strong candidate that is strong? And perhaps, what are the chances that Raila Odinga is winning this one? Welcome to yet another episode of On the Sports. My name is Bart Niyonzima Bashir and they call me TR Bart in this business, and I am always here to serve you what was the hot sauce of the news during the week across the region and all over the globe. And today we begin from outside Rwanda, where we go to the neighboring Kenya, where we had the launch of the candidature of Raila Odinga, known as Papa Azimio. Yes. Now, Papa Azimio comes from what he leads, which is the Kenyan Coalition Party for, a lot of parties opposing the government, which came together to have him in power for the first time, after running for over 5 times without anywhere becoming close to being Kenya's epitome leader. Now, Raila Odinga is a known man in the Kenyan politics. He went to parliament in 1999 to 2013, became Kenya's prime minister, and was member of parliament for Chelangat region, of course, in the Kenyan parliament, shortly before he began his now taunted term, which is a title for a presidential, people would say, hopeful? I wouldn't want to say failure. He's keeping on to be hopeful from the time. Raila Odinga Omoro is of a tribe that I wouldn't want to mention because I'm not tribalistic, but it comes from a certain tribe that represents a certain magnitude in Kenya. And of course, he is seen himself run against over 5 different candidates and lose to them. The recent one being the hustler, yes, Kenya's president now, William Ruto Samoei. And now, he has changed the guns and targeted the bigger fish, which is at the epitome of the African Union. That is to transfer him to Addis Ababa if he wins. He's running currently against 4 other candidates. That's one from Djibouti, another one from the other nations we'll be talking about later on. But the candidature has been launched. Kenya is flagging him as their best candidate. Not only limited to Kenya, but now the entire East Africa is saying it's our time to be at the helm of the African Union. The candidature was launched. We saw President Yoweri Kaguta Museveni there. We saw General Kabarebe representing President Paul Kagame there. We saw Samia Suluhu, Doctor of Tanzania, there. And of course, the Minister of East African Affairs and the first Deputy Prime Minister of Burundi representing General Neva over there. I am always with Innocent Haumujisha to discuss these issues. And today, welcome to the sport.
Thank you so much, Bright.
Yes, sir. How are you? Have you been?
Fantastic.
Interesting.
Yes. Yeah.
Interesting news.
Interesting news or current news is the East African community supporting the candidature of the son of the soil. That's Raila Odinga. He becomes the son of the soil because he's coming from one of the countries that is a member of the East African community, Kenya. Yes, so greetings to our brothers in Kenya. UKWELI Times, we are also in Kenya, bringing to you the analysis in English. Actually, we love you and we have you at heart. Make sure that you subscribe to be getting more of our news and updates in English on UKWELI Times.
Interesting. Wenzetu kutoka Nakuru kufika Nairobi, tunasema asante sana. And this is where we begin from. Is it time for the East Africa to actually lead the world where Africa has been lagging behind and has had the rest of the African regions lead? We have seen West Africa lead, we have seen North Africa lead. it's always been East Africa. Now, shortly before the launch of the candidature of Raila Odinga, we saw the former health minister of Tanzania being voted to lead the World Health Organization African Region Office. And now, one of the strongest candidates for the African Union is Raila Odinga from East Africa. What does this mean for East Africa?
It means a lot. It is sending, sorry, excuse me. It is sending a big signal and a strong signal to other regions of Africa that East Africa as a region is also existing. East Africa as a region has also the capacity to be represented. It has produced men and women who are capable and able to represent them on international affairs. Yes.
Interesting indeed. Who is Raila Odinga?
Raila Odinga, he's called Raila Omoro Odinga. He's a Kenyan politician born on 7th of January 1945 in Kenya. Raila Odinga has held different portfolios in Kenya, including being a prime minister of Kenya from 2008 to 2013. That was 5 years. He was once a member of parliament, MP, for Langata constituency from 1992 to 2013. You can imagine from 1992 to 2013, that's about 21 years as a member of parliament. And then he has been a leader of opposition in Kenya since 2013. He is the leader of Amaziona La Umoja, One Kenya Coalition Party. Yeah, so that's a summary of Bwana Odinga. Odinga has also run for president of Kenya 5 times, 5 consecutive times, with none of his attempts being successful. Each time, Odinga has alleged electoral fraud. And yeah. So in 1997, he finished 3rd as a candidate of National Development Party, NDP. In 2007, he ran again for the presidency under the Orange Democratic Movement, ODM.
Remember
and,
when it was a crisis over there?
Yes, and people actually, I think, had to go to
the International
Criminal Court in La Haye, in the Netherlands, in Hague. Yeah, and lost to Mwai Kibaki. Mwai Kibaki is late now, may his soul rest in peace, Muse. In 2013, 2017, and 2022, Odinga was the runner-up as a candidate for Coalition for Reforms and Democracy, CORD, led by Uhuru
and Ruto,
Ruto, the current president of Kenya, National Super Alliance, NASA, and Amazio La Umoja, respectively. After his loss, he filed his petition against President-elect William Ruto. This was just the previous elections. Yeah, so the Supreme Court of Kenya decided against him, and Odinga pleaded to respect the ruling. So in February 2024, he announced his candidacy, his intention to stand as the chairperson for African Union Commission. And this is what we are about to analyze now, what it means to the East African community. We started by actually summarizing his political history. So when East Africa gets such a candidate, he's going to if he wins these elections, he will be replacing Musa. Musa comes from, I think, Mali. That is West Africa. And even the previous one who was there before Musa was also coming from West Africa. So basically, West Africa has been producing big names when it comes to region or continental affairs. So this time around, we are seeing East African community trying to penetrate. So why I'm also trying to say it's East African community penetrating? Because we have seen all the countries from East African community supporting the candidature of Raila Odinga. For instance, last week or the other week, we had head of states from East African community, Madam Suhur from Tanzania, the president of Tanzania. We had the Silva Kiir, the president of South Sudan. We had retired General James Kabarebe representing His Excellency Paul Kagame, the President of Rwanda. We had Ndayishimiye Evariste, the President of Burundi. We had also Mzee Kaguta Museveni, the President of Uganda. All these met in Kenya. Also, where they were hosted by the head of state of Kenya, that is President Ruto. So basically, the meeting of these people, and even Odinga himself was there, the meeting of these people is a indication enough, or is a proof enough to show the commitment of East African members, country members, supporting one candidate from East Africa. So apart from that, we are also seeing East African community growing big when it comes to regional affairs participation, because we just saw the Tanzanian
Deputy Health Minister
being elected to be representing a World Health Organization in Africa. That's a big position, and we have seen head of states from East African community congratulating him and congratulating Tanzania on their X accounts. You can go and check there for those who are doubting. So coming with Odinga is an addition to the person who is already there in World Health Organization. Now we are going to have Odinga. So, you know, when you have, in Kinyarwanda they say, ugiye gutera uburezi arabwibanza. When we have a representative from East Africa, and that person knows how he elevated to reach that position, most likely he's going to share the African resources equally. But trust me, he will be more advantaged in East Africa because we have a representative. Sometimes he can divert a railway line, sometimes he can divert a load, sometimes he can divert a big project. Imagine if the World Health Organization wanted to bring, like maybe to bring what we call a project of production of maybe certain medicine. And then, because the deputy minister is the current, the boss in Africa, he decides to build it in Tanzania. The plant, he builds it in Tanzania. That means that he's giving advantage to his countries. Apart from that, Raila Odinga also being the chairman for East African community. You know, we have had some conflicts in the regions. Sometimes that I believe needs the consent or the efforts of East African Union to end those crises. For instance, the problem of terrorist groups in Eastern DRC
and the Central African Republic.
And the South African Republic. All those are crises that, with the participation of African Union, we can come to and put an end to that. Maybe sometimes African Union doesn't pay attention to it for a reason that they don't know or they don't understand the history of East African or Central Africa, because they are coming from West. So having maybe someone from this region, maybe to help to
solve some
of these issues. Yes.
Interesting way to look at things. Over the time, we have seen East Africa develop as opposition itself to the world as a global tour destination. Currently, the East Africa issues one visa, whereby you land in Uganda, you land in Kenya, come to Uganda, go to Rwanda. Tanzania is yet to onboard. Somalia is preceding. They still have security issues, but also now you use the same visa to go to Ethiopia. Interesting thing to do.
Yes.
East Africa currently has some of the biggest projects, including the East African Gauge Railway. We have the two East African nations starting with the exploration of big oil barrel seasons. That's South Sudan and Uganda. We have East Africa positioning itself as one global tour giant. We have East Africa being one of the regions that has enrolled so big in their air and aviation industries. Does this show East Africa as a giant indeed that is in the position now to steer the entire Africa towards development?
Yes, what that means is that once those projects are achieved. The problem is achieving them. Once they are achieved, that means automatically East African region becomes the giant or becomes the powerhouse of the entire continent. Because we are looking at the air transport. We have Kenya Airways. That's one of the biggest companies we have on the continent. We have Rwanda Air. It's also grown and it's a big company now, reliable. We have Ethiopia Airways. It's big and reliable. We have Uganda Airways, though it's not that big, but there are few airplanes. Tanzania, they have few airplanes. I think the country that in East African region that has no airplane must be South Sudan
and Burundi. Yes.
So these others, they have airplanes and they have companies that can carry cargo and carry passengers. That's one on air transport. We are talking about this railway line coming to all these countries, that project. Should that project be a success, that means we are going to have interconnection between these East African countries. That means this is going to ease the movement of goods, the movement of products, the movement of people. And once the goods are moving, once the people are moving, it means even the currency is in circulation. And you know, I think in one of the pillars they have is also to have a common currency, East African common currency.
Due diligence was supposed to be 2012, it was extended to 2025.
Yeah, so hopefully once even that currency comes in, automatically we are going to see East African community being the powerhouse for the entire continent of Africa.
Interesting way to introduce Raila Odinga. Now, my question then would be, we saw a strategy whereby one of the East African hopefuls pull out of the race. The foreign minister of Somalia, Madam Halima Amal, she pulled out of the race. Does this mean the East Africa is positioning itself to have one strong candidate that is strong? And perhaps, what are the chances that Raila Odinga is winning this one?
Much as I'm concerned, probably I'm not fully equipped with the information, but I think Somalia has also joined East African community recently. So Somalia producing a candidate and Kenya producing a candidate from the same region, that means that they could split the votes. So I think that that candidate pulling out was a strategy of avoiding the situation, the conflict of splitting the votes. So that if they avoid splitting the votes, it means they are avoiding that Raila Odinga will lose. That means they are making sure that they are doing everything possible to make sure that he wins. Yes.
Interesting way to look at it. What then would be the advantage of other continents or the other parts of the continent actually borrowing from the experience of Raila Odinga? Raila Odinga being a leader of opposition in the Kenyan government for the longest time possible, being a 5-time hopeful to be president. This is experience enough that he has seen what is not being done in Kenya, which is perhaps the rest of the region's problems. Where does this position Africa having him as the African Union chairman?
I didn't get your question clearly.
I'm saying you have a candidate for the African Union chairman,
yes,
who has wanted to run the country for 5 years, for 5 terms. That means he has been the longest in opposition. That means he wants to collect certain issues that are not being collected in his country, which could be same issues in other countries across the continent. Can we then say that we have a man that understands the problems of Africa from an opposition perspective and experience?
Yes, yeah. Maybe he can understand the politics from his country, not the politics from other countries, other African countries. Because these African countries, they have got different politics. Some of these African countries, I think they have never had democratic elections. Some of these countries have been having democratic elections since their inception. Let's look at Somalia. Somalia, I think they have never had elections.
They were supposed to have one last year, but then they can't.
I'm saying they have never had elections. So that's why I'm saying he cannot understand all the politics. Number two, he has been losing for 5 times. So it's maybe he's born to lose. you might not be surprised. Don't be surprised if he also loses on this one. Okay? So for him, losing is his thing. Than understanding. He understands what losing means. That's why even on this position, he might lose it, and for sure he's going to understand what it means to losing. For him, winning might be a big thing for him, because maybe he might correct. He's not going to correct what is not going right in his country, but what I think he's going to do is going to support his country for development. Because his country is being governed by a president constitutionally, elected by the citizens and other members of parliament. So someone coming from African Union cannot come to interfere with the what you call the businesses or the jobs of the internal affairs of a government.
However, don't you think that because Africa has been facing the same issues, because if you look at the lack of job rate in East Africa as compared to Central Africa, as compared to the West Africa, it's the same issue. We have seen the youth all over Africa rising up against their running governments. Most of them, not all of them. We have seen instabilities, some of them leading to the rise of what we would call military juntas across Africa, and they represent the same issues. Issues of neocolonialism, issues of not having a financial model in Africa that can actually put us at a place where we are actually independent, because Africa is facing a big debt burden. This is a unified issue, and when he was campaigning for president, he was talking about these same issues. Don't you think this is an experience that actually Africa needs from a man like Raila Odinga?
Yes, you are right. There's one thing I like about the Kenyan politics. In Kenyan politics, I would say there's no permanent enemy. Last time President Uhuru won elections, he won Raila Odinga. President Uhuru was sworn in. Remember, Raila Odinga also was sworn in by a Canadian lawyer who was later deported. So in my mind, back of my mind, I was thinking that this time now Raila Odinga is going to jail. What do you see in the following morning? Seeing them in church being reconciliated, and they reconciliated them. They became like brothers.
And then he becomes prime minister.
He became a prime minister. After that term finished, Ruto wins elections. He takes them to court. Today they are together. Now Ruto is supporting him to be
the African
Union. I think that from our brothers in Kenya, we have to say congratulations to them, but also we have to learn something from them. They don't have permanent enemies in politics. So taking their brother to African Union, it's a plus for them. You know, it's actually they are building the CV for Kenya. To know that Kenya has had someone originating from Kenya being a president of America, Obama. To know that Kenya have had
original black American managing America. Now Kenya is managing the affairs of African Union. That means a lot. So we should learn something from them. You know, every day we have to learn something from each other. We learn from each other. In some countries, you find that an opposition leader, probably they are killed or arrested. I'll give you an example of a country like Somalia. Somalia, I think they don't have opposition leaders. In some countries, like which other country that they do mistreat opposition leaders? I think Swaziland.
Swaziland?
Yeah. Okay.
But when it comes to countries like in East Africa, for instance, when you look at Rwanda, opposition leaders, you find the Frank Habineza. Loses elections, he goes to parliament. Philippe Mpayimana loses elections, he goes to the Minister of National Unity. In Uganda, Bob Wine loses elections, he's back to be in his
music
and business on daily basis. You go to Tanzania, it's the same thing. The opposition leaders are there. Kenya is the same thing. The opposition leaders are there. So I think it's actually the spirit of East African community countries to make sure that even after the elections, there's life after elections. Yes.
Interesting way to look at things indeed. This is On the Spot, and we are continuing to discuss issues that made headlines in the week. Basically, Raila Odinga has been making it. Could he be that hopeful that Africa becomes the epitome of the continent's all? But then, does his experience actually bring advantage to the African Union? Does this mean that the leader, the Somali lady that pulled out could actually be the running mate? We'll be back. See you soon. Welcome from that short commercial break, and my name is Bright Bashir. Call me TR Bright, and of course I'm still with the amazing Innocent Haumujisha discussing the epitome of Africa's politics, that's Raila Odinga, and possibly likely to be his running mate, the lady from Somalia who pulled out of the race to allow him an advantage. Could it be that time where we see Raila Odinga win an election after him winning the last one in 2013 as Member of Parliament? Innocent Haumujisha, you were talking about, when we were off camera, you were talking about the lady from Rwanda who is now the Vice Chairman.
Yes.
And we were correlating it with, are we here to see another lady from East Africa becoming the deputy at the African Union Commission?
Actually, the first thing is we have to see is that should we have Bwana Raila Odinga as the chairperson from East African community, we are also going to have his vice chairperson, Madame Sanzaraganwa Monique, who is the current vice chairperson. So actually we have two people from the same region, East Africa. That also brings us to the point of East Africa becoming the powerhouse for Africa, sending these leaders to African Union and other economic ventures. So there's no doubt that Raila Odinga is going to win. So from what we see in this African Union politics, you see that they support each other. Most likely this running mate, his running mate, the lady from Somali, is likely to take up the role of the vice chairperson in future, or even the role of the chairperson in the future. But for now, for me, I give the highest possibility or the highest chance to Mzee Raila Odinga to win these elections. Yeah.
Interesting way to look at things. We have seen women like Haile Mariam Desalegn from Ethiopia being at the epitome of leadership, and they have produced quite a good number of achievements. We are yet to see what Raila Odinga brings from East Africa to the rest of Africa. My name has been TR Bright. Call me Bright News Bashir. My guest, Innocent Haumujisha. UKWELI Times is where you are watching us, and you can follow us on all our platforms. That's on X, on Facebook and Instagram. That's at UKWELI Times everywhere, and you can watch all the latest live content on YouTube, UKWELI Times English.